Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is TVP World. You're watching World News. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and these are the latest headlines. Presidents, prime ministers, and senior officials are gathering in Finland today as the region faces mounting pressure to enhance security in the Baltic Sea. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Diamond, is in Helsinki and joins us now. Morning, Aaron. What can we expect from this meeting?
Good morning, Ben. Well, a real power troop is assembling here in the Baltic in Helsinki. We're at the presidential palace of the Finnish President Alexander Stubb. He's co-hosting this summit with Prime Minister of Estonia, Kristen Michel, and it is all about securing the stretch of water that this presidential palace looks out onto, the Baltic Sea. Remember, there have been a string of incidents in the Baltic Sea since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Anchors dragging along the sea floor, suspected acts of sabotage like internet cables being cut, and NATO has now sent 10 ships to guard underwater infrastructure. But remember, in November, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk made, well, a very similar assessment, a very similar recommendation to the NATO Baltic countries. Here is Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk this morning.
We have proposed reinforced patrols in the Baltic Sea, somewhat along the lines of air policing, which is patrolling the airspace over Poland and other NATO countries located near Russia. It is really about deterrence, but also effectively monitoring who is entering the Baltic Sea, with what and whether they pose a threat. Today there will finally be a meeting with the participation of the NATO Secretary-General at the invitation of the President of Finland, where we will talk about practical actions to secure the Baltic Sea from what's most likely Russian sabotage.
So there you go, Donald Tusk urging Navy patrols back in November, and again reiterating that today among some of the dignitaries here this morning will be Prime Minister Tusk, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, even as he himself faces an election that he is very unlikely at this point to win, according to the polls back home in Germany. And just yesterday, Mark Rutte made a significant comment, if you like, to the European Parliament, saying that if defence spending doesn't rise, then MEPs should, quote, get out your Russian language courses or go to New Zealand. I'm sure he will echo that similar sentiment here today. They will soon arrive here, then they will go behind closed doors, and a final press conference, all before midday Warsaw time, on a morning blitz of diplomacy.
All right, does seem like the event is kicking off soon, so please keep us posted. Meanwhile, appreciate it, Aaron. Thank you. With less than a week to go before Donald Trump is inaugurated, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte is setting the stage. In his recent address to the EU Parliament, Rutte urged European countries to allocate some of their welfare spending to finance their militaries. Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary-General, reiterated the pressing issue of increasing defense spending. In his latest speech in front of the European Parliament, he pointed out that 24 out of NATO's 32 members meet the target of 2% GDP spending on defense. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is raising the stakes. Last week, the U.S. president-elect called on allies to spend 5% of GDP on defense, and Rutte offered little comfort to politicians seeking a reprieve, warning that the final NATO spending target could reach 3.6 or 3.7% of GDP. Quote, we are safe now, but not in 4 or 5 years, he warned, adding that if defense spending doesn't increase, Europeans might need to, quote, get out of your Russian language courses or move to New Zealand. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte visited the European Parliament on Monday to rally more support for NATO and Ukraine. He reiterated his call for alliance members to meet their defense spending targets, but faced tough questions from MEPs on strategies to safeguard the bloc from both international and external threats.
Security in the EU does not come for free. This was the resounding message by NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte as he visited European Parliament today since first taking office in October. Now, this is the first official appearance of him in the hemicycle, and it was designed to drum up support for the NATO military alliance, as well as Ukraine, as that country where there's another year of Russian aggression and invasion. Now, unsurprisingly, he said the major issue facing the continent in terms of security is NATO members that are not meeting that 2% funding GDP benchmark. He also said that roughly only 2/3 of NATO alliance members are close to hitting that target. He also mentioned that the EU's reticence to not looking outside the bloc for manufacturing partners was preventing the distribution of arms at an efficient pace. And while fielding questions from MEPs about the incoming presidency of US leader Donald Trump, who has signalled that he wanted to potentially take the Arctic island of Greenland by force, Rutte was careful to suggest that he did not want to create new barriers or obstacles within NATO and foster better relations. Now, in another corner of Brussels, the European Commission announced that roughly 150 million euros will be distributed to Ukraine and Moldova to help refugees impacted by the war. 8 million of those euros will be earmarked for refugees in Moldova to access cash payments as well as medical and psychosocial support. The announcement came as the EU Commissioner for Equality, Haja Labib, was visiting some of those war-torn communities in Kyiv. Now, this is the latest from Brussels in terms of security. My name is Angela Skujins, reporting from TVP World.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy confirmed on Monday night that he held a detailed conversation with his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, about military support for Kyiv and the potential deployment of partner contingents on Ukrainian territory. According to Zelenskyy, the discussion was extensive and thorough. The leaders addressed military support, various forms of defense, and the possibilities for further arms packages for Ukraine. The presidents also discussed, quote, investments in missile procurement and the training of Ukrainian forces. Zelenskyy noted that this would include the training of Ukrainian soldiers in France. The conversation with Macron follows talks between the French president and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer on January 10th, where they discussed further support and security guarantees for Ukraine. The French president remains a key advocate of bolstering Ukraine's defense amid the ongoing Russian aggression. Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico has publicly invited Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to discuss gas supplies. The offer follows Kyiv's decision to hold Russian gas deliveries through its territory.
Such a meeting will create good preconditions for an open discussion on gas supplies to Slovakia and other countries via Ukraine, on possible technical solutions taking into account the expiration of the contract between the respective Ukrainian and Russian companies on December 31st, 2024, on the impact of the suspension of gas transit via Ukraine, on the declining competitiveness of the European economy, and on the development of bilateral Slovakian-Ukrainian relations.
And just to follow up, in response, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has invited Robert Fico to visit Kyiv on Friday, so we'll see how that shapes out. Now, in addition to military efforts, Ukraine is intensifying its financial battle against Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has introduced a decree imposing sanctions on a new group of Russian financial entities and submitted draft legislation to impose criminal liability for attempts to bypass these financial restrictions. Zelensky's decree targets Russia's financial sector, affecting 140 entities. The Ukrainian president added that Kyiv will continue working with its partners to coordinate the pressure on the Kremlin. The draft law aligns with international sanction practices. In a post on the social media platform Telegram, Zelenskyy emphasized that, quote, the greater the pressure on the aggressor, the closer we are to peace. Zelenskyy called the sanctions a vital tool for exerting pressure on Russia and its war collaborators and confirmed the bill's submission to Ukraine's parliament for further action. The decree targets 75 individuals, all Russian citizens, 63 entities registered in Russia, and 2 companies based in the British Virgin Islands. Outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden has stated that America is, quote, spending more on its defense than it ever has. Speaking at the U.S. State Department, Biden reaffirmed the nation's commitment to supporting Ukraine and highlighted the importance of expanding military capabilities to tackle ongoing and emerging challenges facing democracies around the world.
We've also significantly strengthened the defense industrial base, investing almost $1.3 trillion in procurement and research and development. In real dollars, that's more than America did in any 4-year period during the Cold War. Our alliances are stronger than they've been in decades. NATO is more capable than it's ever been, and many more of our allies are paying their fair share. Before I took office, 9 NATO allies were spending 2% of their GDP on defense. Now 23 are spending 2%. We help Ukrainians stop Putin. And now, nearly three years later, Putin has failed to achieve any of his strategic objectives. He has failed thus far to subjugate Ukraine, failed to break the unity of NATO, and failed to make large territorial gains.
Former Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki is expected to become the new chairman of the European Conservatives and Reformists Party. The party will meet on Wednesday to elect a new leader to replace its current head, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Mateusz Morawiecki led Poland's conservative Law and Justice government from 2017 to 2023. He's an economist with a background in banking. The ECR is the 4th largest party in the European Parliament, with members including Brothers of Italy, Poland's Law and Justice Party, the Czech Civic Democratic Party, and the Sweden Democrats. Tensions on the Korean peninsula continue. The South Korean military has confirmed that North Korean forces launched an unidentified projectile towards the Sea of Japan. The South Korean Joint Chief of Staff confirmed the activity in a statement, adding that further details about the launch are still under investigation. Seoul's acting president vowed to respond sternly to Pyongyang's provocations. Japanese authorities confirmed that the projectile landed outside of Japan's water. North Korea's last missile test occurred on January 6, when it claimed to have launched a medium-range hypersonic ballistic missile. The test marked Pyongyang's first provocation of the year, with this latest launch being the second ahead of the upcoming inauguration of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. U.S. President Joe Biden has announced that tens of billions of dollars will be required to restore Los Angeles to its pre-wildfire condition. At least 24 people have died in the fires that began on January 7th, with officials estimating damage to over 12,000 structures.
First, I want to share an update on where things stand now, as we know. 1, over the past few weeks, state and local and federal firefighters are able to prevent the largest fires from moving into new areas. In other words, they're able to contain the fires. 14% containment in the Pacific Palisades that's how much has been contained. 33% in the fire in Pasadena, 95% in Sylmar, and the fire in Ventura has been 100% contained. And that's progress. And although the federal government is going to cover 100% of the cost for the next 180 days for things like firefighter overtime pay, debris removal.
Former 2-time heavyweight world champion Tyson Fury has announced his retirement from boxing. The announcement comes after the 36-year-old lost his rematch against Alexander Usyk last month for the WBA, WBO, and WBC world heavyweight titles. Fury has previously retired on several occasions after defeating Dylan White in 2022 and in 2017 and 2013, only to return to the ring shortly afterwards. He made the announcement on social media saying that he, quote, loved every minute of his time in the ring. And with that, we conclude this edition of World News. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.